Good afternoon, and welcome to today's VetNet Entrepreneurship Track presentation. This is our first presentation in our Social Entrepreneurship Series that we will be holding over the course of the month of June. During this series, we'll be talking about social entrepreneurship and the business case for giving back. Today's presentation is session 1, where we'll be talking principles for making meaning of your enterprise. The second session we will be discussing internal operations. The third, financing your enterprise. And finally, the fourth, we'll be discussing external operations. Today's presentation, obviously, is June 3rd. The second presentation will take place on June 10th at 1 p.m. The third will be June 17th at 1 p.m. And the final presentation will be on June 24th at 1 p.m. All of these events can be found out on our VetNet Entrepreneurship Track page. Before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. If you're participating live during the presentation, please feel free to speak up with questions at any point during the conversation, and we'll make sure that they're relayed to Gary, Paul, or Mirza. Secondly, you can enable the chat function, which can be enabled by hovering over the left side of your screen, clicking the chat icon, and you can type your question in the box. If you're watching live out on our YouTube stream, please feel free to type your question in there, and I'll relay it to our presenters. And finally, you can always type your question in the event page as well. So with that being said, I'll turn things over to Gary Shaheen. I'll let him introduce himself, and we'll get started.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mike. It's a pleasure to be on this call and kick off this important series. So I'm Gary Shaheen. I am the Director for Community-Based Technical Support Initiatives at the Institute for Veterans and Military Families. And I've been working in the field of social entrepreneurship for, well, I almost hate to say it, almost 35 years, beginning in the public sector where we rewrote some sections of the finance law to create set-asides for businesses that addressed social and economic issues for people with psychiatric disabilities back in those days, and also people with disadvantages, and then onwards to creating my own not-for-profit corporation, and directed that for about 10 years, an LLC after that, and quite a bit in terms of training both nationally and internationally on the topic. So when Mike approached us and talked about doing something related to social entrepreneurship, as you can imagine, I jumped at the chance. And so my session is going to be setting the stage, if you would, and talking about some of the mission orientation for social entrepreneurship, and then present to you a framework that we use here at Syracuse University upon which we teach and develop social enterprises. But of course, I'll begin with what's the definition of social enterprises. So for today's session, we have one presenter. Unfortunately, our second presenter had some technical difficulties, and she won't be joining us for this session, but we're going to be really sure to get her on a future session. So before I begin and jump into this presentation and talk a little bit about my co-presenter, I'd like to turn it on over quickly to my colleague Mirza Tihich, who operates our training tracks for our entrepreneurship bootcamp for veterans with disability, and is sort of my co-conspirator, if you would, on both teaching and training in this. So Mirza, do you want to say a couple of words about yourself to our audience, and then I'll take the mic back and jump back in.
It looks like Mirza popped away from his desk real quick. So.
That was great timing.
So why don't we go ahead and
jump in? Well, that's his loss, folks.
Absolutely.
Loss. Okay, so
he's back. He's back.
He's back. Okay, Mirza, you missed your big intro. So I was just mentioning to our audience, Mirza, that I'd ask you to do a quick hello since you are managing the EBV TAP and having a special interest in entrepreneurship. So do you want to tell folks a little bit about your orientation and the connection to this social entrepreneurship to EBV TAP?
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. As Gary already mentioned, my name is Mirza Tihich. My role here at the Institute for Veterans and Military Family is Director of Program Support Services. I work with a team that provides any ongoing services for all the veterans and military family members that graduate from any of our programs. That said, I've been involved with Entrepreneurship Bootcamp for Veterans with Disabilities since the beginning in 2007. I have worked with a lot of local for-profits and non-for-profits. I'm also doing a PhD in disability studies with a focus on social value creation amongst entrepreneurs with disabilities. And I'm also a co-founder of several local non-for-profit organizations. My primary role has been on building sustainability of those organizations. And together with Gary, I will be available on Thursdays for live office hours if you have any questions. So whatever questions you cannot address today, please remember to ask those on Thursday, or even send us an email or post them. If you watch this video later on, post them there and we'll make sure to address those.
Wonderful.
It's a pleasure to be with you, and I look forward to hear from the great speakers and presenters. Thank you for having me with you.
Very good. Thank you, Mirza. So, yes.
Is that working?
Hey, Paul, we got you now.
There's Paul. Excellent. Wonderful. Good. So, Paul, I was just about to do your intro, then I'll do my piece, and let's turn it over to you. So my co-presenter is Paul Jenkins, and he's a Navy veteran. He's a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy. And then upon leaving the service in 1995, Paul moved into leadership roles in state and local governments before taking executive positions in private industry. He has two companies. We're going to hear about one of those today, the Veteran Beer Company, and he's president and CEO also of Bancroft Architects and Engineers based in Chicago. So after conceiving of Veteran Beer Company in 2012, he wanted to combine both the business and the social mission of serving veterans. So they launched their first beers into Indiana in Illinois 6 months ago with the hopes of selling 1,000 cases in their first year. They've already sold 30,000 cases, have expanded distribution into Minnesota, Wisconsin, the Dakotas, and Michigan. And my question to Paul, of course, is going to be, when do we get you guys into New York State? I'm getting thirsty already. So I'm glad to have Paul with me on this, and let me just jump into the overview of social entrepreneurship and then turn it on over to Paul for the remainder of the session. So can we get that first slide up, the what is slide, please? Okay, so what is a social entrepreneur? Well, all of you on the line, or many of you who are thinking of starting your own business, think first perhaps in terms of what are the kind of financial situations I'm going to get into, where am I going to get resources, what kind of products or services am I going to sell, all to the effect of creating profit, creating money, creating value back to shareholders. But in fact, social entrepreneurs marry the mission to the business market. Social entrepreneurs identify and solve social problems, and they use the business as a framework and as a function for identifying ways to do social and civic good. So what we call social entrepreneurship really involves a double bottom line. Businesses should attend to the bottom line of making an effective business, otherwise your social purpose will not be met. But they also need to attend to their social purpose, because that is the driving force that was the impetus for creating the business. So let's go to the next slide, if you would. Why social entrepreneurship for veterans? Okay, so here's what we've heard since the beginning of the Entrepreneurship Bootcamp for veterans with disabilities back in 2007. And I was fortunate to be involved in that program right from the beginning and to help create curricula for that project and do training. And almost every single training event that I did, there were a number of veterans in that audience that were joining in to start a business who say that I want to give back. That my orientation as a veteran, as a service member, is all about service to my country, service to my community, and I want to take what I know about or want to learn about a business, and I want to give back to the community. So the service-to-service motivation is extremely strong for veterans. That's why it makes sense for many veterans to start social enterprises. In addition, we've heard from many veterans that if I start a business, one of the things I want to do is to hire veterans. I want to hire veterans. I want to hire veterans' family members. I want to give back to the veteran community by helping to create better economic futures. So when I create a business, that means I can open up jobs for veterans, and especially veterans that might have had a service-connected disability, for whom other wage employment might not be an option, who are looking for other career options. These veteran business owners want to be the ones that fill that breach. Again, and related to the service connections, we've heard from many veterans that the reason they want to write a business is to right a wrong. In other words, help alleviate a social, civic, economic rights issue. We've heard particularly that many veterans want to address veteran homelessness. So how do I create a business that creates housing for veterans, that creates supportive services for veterans transitioning from homelessness? So you get the feeling from all of these discussions that we've had that social entrepreneurship fits very nicely within the veteran mentality, within the veteran identity, and with the veteran career aspirations. So let's go to the next slide. It's a graphic on the social business case. It's a circle. And it basically is a way to graphically show how these all work together. That veterans begin with a sense of values and a vision for a new future. Out of that becomes the mission orientation. How do I align what I want to do with a business with what I want to do in alleviating a right, alleviating a wrong, or else addressing issues of need for communities and for veterans in particular, and then what is the business model? What types of products, services, structure, helps me achieve those goals? So that, if you would, is the schematic. Let's go to the next slide, please. That is the creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship support model. Here at Syracuse University, as you can imagine, we do a lot of training and teaching in entrepreneurship, and including social entrepreneurship. And my colleague Mirza and I work directly with this model. And I present it to you because it provides an exceptionally clear framework for the developmental steps that you may want to take if you're considering a social enterprise. And as Mike kicked us off, we're going to have successive webinars, successive VetNet Hangouts on each aspect of these, including financing, internal operations, external operations. But it begins with the first layer, addressing your entrepreneurial core. It goes back to the mission. Why do I want to create a social enterprise? What is it intending to do? What's the best business model? Who can support me in my efforts, both in my mission orientation, but also in my life situation? We all know that running a business is, in many cases, a 24/7 type of an operation. And if I have a family, who is available to support me in my family role as well as me in my business role? So it's that internal analysis, if you would, we call the entrepreneurial core. And we'll talk more in succeeding webinars after this series if people want more instruction on these methods. Layer 2 is our internal operations. So it's what Paul had to address. It's what Tamra, who unfortunately can't be with us today, had to address. What is the infrastructure? What is the nuts and bolts of operating this business? What about our IRS status? What are we organized for? What kind of financial records do we need to keep? What about inventory and staff hiring and job descriptions? It's all those types of things that make your business go on the ground. And our layer 3 is our external relations and activities, your opportunities, describing your competitors, your customer base. Just because you're in the social entrepreneurship arena does not mean that you do not have competitors. You're all out there looking to not only compete on a product basis, but competing for foundation money, for grants, and those types of things. So it's important that part of your strategy in developing a social enterprise also includes looking at your external partners, your external competitors, your constituencies, and defining your competitive niche and market. So let's go to the next one. And this is entitled Social Enterprise Profile. It gives you a little bit more of a background in each one of those layers. The core, your personal skills and gifts and strengths, your business-driven goals, all the way down the line. I won't read them to you. You have them available in your slide. But I would urge you to think, if you're going to develop a social enterprise, to address questions like this as you look at your motivation for developing the business, because this will help you stick with it The same holds true with internal operations and resources. Some of the questions you'll need to ask yourself is, what kind of financial accounting systems do I need? What about my infrastructure, my board? Who is the best makeup for my advisors? What are my suppliers? All those other types of things. And then the external network, again, as I mentioned, is your customer base. How do you approach marketing? How do you approach financing, your loans, your grants? And ultimately, how do you bring your mission to market by addressing all three of those aspects? Let's go to the next slide, which will be really my last slide, and then I really want to turn it over to Paul, who is right now the boots on the ground and the beer on the ground as well, to talk about, you know, his vision, his mission, and the business of his company. So my last slide is this. So you have the vision now, you have the mission, but is there an enterprise opportunity? What are the forces that create this opportunity? Are there a lot of people who are really dry out in the state of Indiana, who are longing for a craft beer, and Paul saw that as an opportunity to address the social mission? Or are there other aspects? Do you find that veteran housing is something that's needed in your community? So doing a good market analysis is important for any business, including a social business. What are the barriers to entry? Who are your competitors, as I mentioned? Is there a profit opportunity? Because even if you're set up as a not-for-profit corporation, you're going to be pulling in revenue, and it's going to be related to your business, and you want to be able to plow that back in so you can do additional development and expand your focus and your range of services to those people that you intended to serve through the business in the first place. What is the window of opportunity? Today we have great support for veterans and veteran-owned businesses. So how do you capitalize upon that type of support? By creating a business that achieves a social and a business bottom line, and then you also need to consider competitors and so on. Your last few slides are some resources. Well, there's a slide on resources, and my parting thought is this: how will and it's the last slide in front of us, how will your enterprise make meaning? We're going to hear more from Paul on this, and we'll hear more as we move into the series. But remember always that entrepreneurship is not something you do. It's a philosophy that you bring to life. And so, as Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see in the world. And with that, Paul, tell us about how you're making changes that you wish to see in the world. I'm turning it over to you now.
Well, thanks very much, Gary, and thank you for the opportunity to talk. I recognized, as a veteran who comes from a military family, that we had a problem in America where it was a disadvantage if you served in the U.S. military and then came home, got out of the military. You were at a disadvantage compared to your peers who hadn't served the country, and I thought that was a bad state of affairs. And if it continued, I mean, for generations, what we would see, I think, is a diminished interest in the military. We would get to a point, I think, where we wouldn't be able to support an all-volunteer force if you sort of extrapolate down the road. And I recognize that that would undermine sort of a core principle that is service to the country. That was July of 2012, and I have worked in business before. I've been very lucky to be in some great leadership positions in government and in private industry, and it made me realize that the two, a for-profit, having a profit motive, but wanting to drive forward with a social mission, were not necessarily mutually exclusive. And when I heard some terrible statistics in July of 2012, veteran unemployment 3 times the national average, disabled veteran unemployment, I mean, these numbers are known by many people, staggeringly high, and then veteran suicide climbing. All of those things served as a motivation to me to say, how can I solve this problem, and how can we as a veteran community work together to solve the problem? The only thing that I could come up with on a short-term basis was a beer company. I'm a guy that doesn't even drink, but I knew that beer is a product that is consumed and enjoyed nationally. It isn't really a niche market. It's a growing market, And so I thought I want to have a company in which everybody, from the person at the top to the person putting air in the tires and everybody in between, is a veteran, and that's what we've tried to achieve with the company. So we went to market with our first 2 beers in November, Veterans Day of 2013, just about 6 months ago. And I would love to tell you that it's been a bed of roses and it's been very easy. It has been a challenge, but it's been a meaningful challenge. And if you don't mind, yeah, we can go right to the first slide, just by way of background. The next one, please, where we talk about our mission and the vision. Again, the mission is we want to change. If we can go back one slide. Well, there's one of the beers. There it is, the overview. The mission of the company is, again, to essentially to provide lives of quality to veterans and their families by providing meaningful post-service careers for veterans. A lot of places talk about giving jobs. We want to provide careers and career opportunities. I think there's a difference. We don't seek to hire people for hourly wages. We hope to employ people with salaries, and we've got our first full-time employees working for us throughout the regions in which we sell beer. And the vision is that what we can do is showcase the talents of veterans by having a company that does most things. I don't think we'll ever get to the point where we do all things better than our peer group in the market. But if we can do most things better than our peer group, I think we can showcase the talents of veterans and show that this is really largely an untapped human resource in America, and sort of turn the momentum in favor of veterans and veteran hiring. The next slide is, I was happy to have it up. Brings a little smile to my face. Everything that you see, the logos, the packaging we buy from veteran-owned small businesses, everything's been designed by veterans, recipes created by veterans. We have 2 beers. One of them is called the Veteran. It's an amber lager. We talked, Gary, you talked a little bit about understanding who your market is, who your competitors are. Craft beer is a growing segment in the marketplace, and craft beer is a fascinating field right now. We intend, and we have, I think, already, and we've won a number of awards. What we wanted to provide were cornerstone beers that were superior in nature to anything in the market. So while we're happy to be up against Sam Adams, and we're happy to be up against New Glarus and Sierra Nevada and others, and be compared to them, we consider our competitors to be Goliath, Miller Coors and Budweiser. If you have a choice in the marketplace and you're going to drink beer, why would you drink beer that is owned by a company that's headquartered overseas, that really takes a lot out of the veteran community? They do a lot of advertising about the work that they do in the veteran community, and their spending on advertising by far exceeds their veteran involvement. So in that way, they're a little disingenuous. So we want to give consumers a choice, and make no mistake, there's nobody in the company that is not targeting the big guys when we go to market. The next product, if you don't mind, the next slide. So that's our amber lager, 5% alcohol by volume, what's called a sessionable beer. The idea is that it's got all natural ingredients, organic wherever we can get them. We try to buy, again, through veteran-owned sources. It's a beer that people say, wow, that's a fantastic beer, give me another. Where in the craft marketplace, people say, that oak-aged raspberry marshmallow beer, that's a really good one, let me try something else. We wanted to create beers that people would come back to again and again. The second beer that we've got, that we launched with, we have more coming, is called the Blonde Bomber. It is, again, 5% alcohol by volume. It's a blonde ale, which is a very popular category in the beverage alcohol industry right now. Very tight carbonation, citrusy. Again, we brew at a brew house that we do with an alternating permit. That's sort of an esoteric term in the industry. We brew it ourselves at a place that's got some of the finest water in America, and that's why we chose them, being sort of beer snobs ourselves. I throw those out by way of background and to a certain extent as advertisement. Next slide, if you don't mind. So here's what I recognized. I come from a military family, and the generation behind me is already at sea and in the military. We recognize that there are certain things. What is it that makes a veteran perhaps special or different? One is the fact that we were all at some point in our lives willing to write a blank check to the U.S. government, and that check was written in full. I mean, that was my life is on the line, and we hope that we and our friends, the government doesn't cash that check, that America doesn't cash that check, but we'd all written it when we raised our right hands. And we think that is an exceptional virtue that makes veterans to a certain extent different. And then the training that we go through, I think the discipline. Now I'm not naive enough to think that every veteran in every part of the world is exactly like the stereotype I'm trying to portray. But I think that those core values, the discipline, the attention to detail, the mission attentiveness, all of those things I think are essential pieces of what we value in the Veteran Beer Company and why we jumped into this. And then on top of the craftsmen, we know that what we've been very good at in our past lives, those who are aviators are really among the world's best aviators. Those who are diesel mechanics are among the world's best diesel mechanics. And you can go down the list. I mean, those who are snipers are regarded as perhaps the best snipers in the world. You can go right down, sonar techs, whatever the MOS, whatever your field was in the military, chances are you were regarded by the military and the world at large as being the best at that. And so we wanted to capitalize on that. Those same sorts of approaches to the work that we do in the military can be applied elsewhere. Next slide, if you don't mind. Thank you. We wanted to keep what we consider to be the best elements of the military identity. Again, I recognize that the military is not a perfect world. It isn't nirvana, but there are certain things that work exceedingly well in the military that I think apply well to industry. We wanted to keep those and sort of pair out the rest. One of the things that we've done, for example, is we have, I like the idea in the military that you had to move up or out. And so we have term limits in the company. 10 years, you've got to be into a new job that is senior to what you left, or you've got to move on and start your own company or go elsewhere. And that goes for me as well. So the counter's ticking. There's nowhere for me to go but out, so I'm going to be turning the company over to the next generation in T-minus 9 years or so. And then diversity, I think, is another hallmark of the U.S. military. I think it's one of the great things. When you're in a foxhole, they say religion falls to the wayside, so does color, background, all of those things. A bullet just knows that you're a body there, and so we recognize that diversity is one of the strengths that we can bring out. And so we're trying to include folks from all walks of life, from all different branches of the military. Obviously male, female, racial minorities. Gay and lesbian community. We're reaching out to everybody with the company. Next slide, if you don't mind. Tells you a little bit about the leadership team. You can jump right through this. I talked a very good longtime friend, Mike Danzer, into starting this with me. Mike is a Marine Corps veteran. I'm a Navy veteran. We went to the Naval Academy together. And Mike is, again, I like to call him the brains of the operation. I sort of think of things at 30,000 feet, and so the terrain is always smooth for me when I look down. Mike is very much more a guy that understands the nuts and bolts of things, and I appreciate that. I think we work well together. I know I'm flattered on a day-to-day basis that Mike is willing to put up with me, because sometimes I generate ideas, and then Mike is the guy that tells me practically whether or not they can be done. He's a great leader, and again, he's just the kind of person that I'm happy to be associated with. Next slide. We're getting short on the slides, so we'll get right out of this and then turn it back over. Next slide, please. This is sort of the philosophy. I think the U.S. military has a fantastic reputation in battle. I mean, we've done exceedingly well, and so as in battle and commerce, why not use the strength of the team that does so well in what I consider to be later in life to be sort of a negative situation? Why not apply that same intensity in commerce? And then once you take it, it isn't simply a for-profit motive. we have to have some patronage for the veteran family, so patronage of what we consider the broader humanity. And along those lines, Gary, we can talk specifically about some of the things. We structured the company as a B Corp, Benefits Corporation. That is a company that is for profit, but we put our mission above profit by law. And so as I make enough money with the company, I have to hire another veteran, which is our mission. We try to only, wherever possible, only employ veterans, obviously. We try to buy through veteran-owned small businesses, and we encourage our partners in the supply chain to hire veterans, because I know that I can't do it all myself, and so I'm sort of spreading the good news out. And it's been, though I say it myself, we've been successful, not just in our own hiring of veterans, but I've been really gratified to see the veteran hiring that's going on in the supply chain. With that, I'll shut up and turn it back over to Gary. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
That's a great discussion, Paul. Just thank you so much for your service to your country and to the veterans that you're serving in your business, and service to all of us that like a good cold beer as well. So,
again, though I say it myself, it's a great beer. We have winning craft beer festivals, and they love our backstory, but they judge us obviously blind, and we keep winning. So that's important to us.
It is, and you bring up an especially important point, is that, a social mission is so important. It's key to social enterprises. But if you're not producing a good product, people might patronize you the first time, but they may not come back to you the second time, or most assuredly the third time. So you have to be competitive in the market with your beer, otherwise you don't meet your social mission, right?
Well, that's right. And part of what we wanted to do was showcase the talents of veterans. And it's difficult, I think, to showcase talent if you're not providing something of superior quality. I mean, the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds, if they were just a ragtag flight team that sort of buzzed around and people said, well, they're not very good aviators, it wouldn't be a great recruiting tool, I think. And so what we're trying to do is that same level, we call it military precision, and I know over the years sometimes people can knock us for that. But I think that sort of level of detail in the work that we do, so that people say, oh my gosh, I mean, look at how good they are at this. And for someone that comes from the military where you had to be that good or someone would die, again, it's a direct translation, and it's wonderful when it works.
Yeah. Well, let's ask you then a question. I don't see any questions popping up in our chat room, but I have one that maybe those in our audience might find interesting, and that is, as you were creating this company, what would you point out as some of the greatest challenges that a social entrepreneur may have to consider, and how did you address those?
I mean, I think that's the fundamental question, and I would say that one thing that, and again, this was an impetus for me starting the company, it is easy to be drawn in to this notion that the goodwill that we're feeling in America translates somehow to either sales or support. Mm-hmm. And that's a frustrating thing. Again, understand that on a micro level, people are willing to stand and give you a standing ovation when you're on the Jumbotron at the baseball game, but then they'll sit back down and ignore you for the rest of the game and the rest of your life. So don't accept the applause and think, well, they love me here, this will be easy. Mm-hmm. They love us superficially. Mm-hmm. But when the time comes for them to step up, I mean, we will sometimes go to tastings and we will say, listen, we have just won in this market of every craft beer, there are 140. We get first and second. And they'll say, oh, that's great, that's wonderful, thank you. Can you tell me where the Modelo is? Mm-hmm. And it's like, right, what more did I need to do to earn your business?
Right.
And so that is a frustration, but it's only a frustration if you go in thinking somehow this will be easy, or because of the goodwill that's in the public, it'll translate directly. You still have to work on a minute-by-minute, day-to-day basis in order to make it successful. And we're not there yet. I mean, we're growing, but it'll be a long time before I feel like I can breathe easily.
Hmm. Excellent. Well, you know, you've made it very clear that hiring veterans is a primary goal of your business. And so, you know, at IVMF, we have a piece that's on our website called The Business Case for Hiring a Veteran, and I don't think we could have said it any more articulately than you did yourself. But in sort of digging down a little bit, if I'm a prospective social entrepreneur and I want to hire veterans into my business, what are some tips and tools for attracting veterans to your business and for supporting them, especially those that might have disabilities, on the job? What's worked for you and your company in both those areas?
Once again, and I don't mean to flatter you, but that's a great question. One of the cautions I would say is that we cannot think, even as veterans, we cannot think of one another as being sort of cookie cutter, and I think the world sometimes thinks of us that way. One of the challenges is, and I think the veteran community can be a great sounding board, if you cannot convince veterans of what you're doing, you are not likely to convince the people who are not in the company. You know, if you get it, you know, they're outside of the community, so they're a great sounding board to start with. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, I think that while you have a social aspect to your company, it still has to be run as a company, as a for-profit. If that's what you choose to do, you can run it that way. And what I mean by that is, we know that there are people, veterans and non-veterans, who are simply going to be a burden wherever they work. Mm-hmm. You cannot, certainly in an early stage, take on cases like that and hope to succeed. They will serve as a parking brake that's consistently on, that hurt you moving forward. So you have to screen veterans just like you would have to do for anything else. And you have to interview carefully. You have to, again, sometimes set aside your desire to do social good and take that as something that you view as the horizon. You're going to be doing social good. But today what you need are the best qualified people to help drive the machine forward, to help get the whole thing off the ground, if you will. And once you get a little altitude, once you're up there, then you can maybe start taking on the hard cases. But in the early days, you certainly need to get the best and the brightest people. Now, I happen to feel that there are veterans who are the best and the brightest, but at the same time, there are some who, either by virtue of the fact that, you know, their personalities are that way, or maybe their circumstances make them that way, you cannot in the early days, I think, afford to take on someone that will serve as a brake to your success.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Well, looks like we have a question from the audience, and that's, who helped you, Paul, to develop your mission and your vision and your value statements, and who are your key stakeholders in that process now?
You know, for better or worse, the project, the company in July of 2012 started with a very small group. Again, I kind of conceived of the idea sitting in traffic on the July 4th weekend, and it was just sort of rumbling around in my head. I had been at a veteran hiring conference in Detroit, Michigan, and what we had there were a bunch of politicians and a bunch of bureaucrats, you know, sort of going at the camera and recommitting to this problem. And they said it in a very sincere way, and they had a bunch of great sound bites, and they put the video film clips out to their constituents all over the country. And then I got back in the car, and I drove back to Chicago, and along the way I saw all the billboards up. And I saw that the veteran brand, people were using our brand. Twist a cap for veterans, grill sausage for the veterans, shop at this store for veterans, welcome home veterans, you know, signed with this company. And I thought, the veteran brand is being used by people who are not returning our investment to us. We're paying for what they're capitalizing on. And so that was really the seed that started to grow. And then it was simply, you know, having that as the basic foundation. I kind of came up with the mission statement that then Mike and one of my other partners, Jim Webster, the three of us kept bouncing the ideas off of one another. And there have been some veterans that have come into the company and have left the company to do other things. Startups obviously are not for everyone. And so the input of all of those people has been enormously helpful. And then it's just been a matter of refining it, but sort of having that basic idea that you can put up on the wall and say that's what we stand for, I mean, that's been essential, and so that was one of the very first things that we did in the company.
Excellent, excellent. So we'll move a bit from the mission and the values piece and go to something that's a bit more nuts and bolts for the business. And we have a question from the audience, and it's, how did you develop networks with some professional people who could give you the technological or the business consulting for this business? I didn't hear that you did bathtub beer before you started this business. So where did you get your actual skill and technology to get this thing going?
That's again, that's an essential piece in the puzzle. Certainly for a guy who, I'm not a beer drinker. I view this as a vehicle, a product vehicle that we can use again to get the talents of veterans known. We have had two disabled Marine brewers help us with recipes, and along the way their input has been vital. Again, what I think is just essential, whatever it is you're going to go to market with, you've got to, and I think the talent is out there. Neither of them is with the company now, but they both helped us in the early days, sort of getting the recipes together and helping us sort of drive the company in a certain direction. And that those resources are there in the veteran community, but you do have to look for them. In both cases, we sort of happened upon them sort of at chance, and they came in and then they left. But those chance meetings, I think, and just keeping your ear to the ground and specifying what you need. Now, for us, it's much easier. There are a lot of veterans who do home brewing. There are a lot of veterans who work in the beverage alcohol industry, from bartenders to people who work in the distribution network to people who work at major breweries. So that network is out there for us much more easily than another business where you might say, wow, where do I find an expert in this? How would I dial into that? I recognize that would be a challenge, and to date we've been pretty lucky, and we've got still more brewers now lined up, with recipes that we're working with them to develop for the next beers that'll come out before the end of the year.
Excellent, excellent. And as we were talking, another question came in. This takes us in a bit of a different direction, and it's Sharon asked us a question on marketing your business, and particularly she's constantly talking about her business and promoting it. What has been your best attention and retention getter, especially for those folks that seem to be wanting to, as you say, jump on the veteran bandwagon, but may not follow through with the coin in their pocket?
I think the people you say no to, I mean, having the ability to say no, and both the wisdom to say no and then the strength to say no. There are many, many people who have said, hey, I love what you're doing, and I want to have my wine company associated with you. We give 10% of everything, to veterans, and so I'm a feel-good story as well. How about we work together? And again, it's thinking it through and saying, right, so 90% goes to you and 10% goes to veterans. Right, you are another person who is trying to capitalize. Now, I appreciate that you're not giving the 10% to someone else, but it is also a business decision for you to do that. And what we've seen, traditionally, is people would make a $1,000 donation and take $10,000 in credit. That, from my perspective, is, again, someone capitalizing on the veteran experience. Okay. And so my strength, I think, has been saying no to people and saying, we're going to market this for what it is. We're not going to do joint marketing with others if they don't support this just as we do. And so we've turned down some opportunities, but at the same time, I think the message remains clearer and more pure, and it's then a message that everyone in the company can talk about, because it's pretty straightforward. No one has to say, am I supposed to talk about these people because they're not really fully on board with us? You talk about our supply chain, you can talk about our distributors, you can talk about the people that are doing the labeling for us, J.S. Burgos, better-known company. You can talk about the hiring that we're doing. It simplifies it and it distills it down to its most basic nature, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Excellent, excellent. So when I do training for enterprise development, I often talk to people I'm training about what I call front door, back door business. Your retail business, your direct sales to customers. but then also your wholesale sales. Now, not knowing how the beer industry works, my guess, but correct me if I'm wrong, is that when you developed your business model, it was going to be primarily wholesale to distributors. But did you have to think about those types of questions? Would you be working out of storefront, out of tours for your brewery, and direct sales of cases to customers, as well as contract sales? How did you approach that issue?
Well, I didn't just think about it then. I think about it on a day-to-day basis. Again, we're a very young company, and so as we grow, those kinds of decisions and what do you prioritize? That's a constant challenge. And then you layer that challenge with this notion of I can be true to the mission. Now, if I buy all of my printed materials from veteran-owned small businesses, but it costs me 3 times as much, is that in effect holding me back? And am I getting closer to the horizon, or am I being mired down in the day-to-day grind? I mean, those are the kinds of decisions that I'm constantly having to deal with. But to answer your question more broadly, the beer industry, the way it works is a manufacturer of beverage alcohol can only legally transport the beer to distributors, wholesalers across the country, and they can only sell to retail accounts, to retailers, and only they can sell to consumers. Okay. So it's this very regulated, very regimented system. I did recognize, though, in the early days that the distributors, as essential as they are, and they do a great job for us, that it is as important, or perhaps more important from my perspective, to interface with consumers and retailers who then interface with consumers. And what we wanted to have was a message that would entice wholesalers to want to work with us, because that's a barrier to entry for many small beverage companies. No one will distribute their product. For us, it has not been, thank goodness, it has not been a barrier to our entry, because I think our message is compelling and the beer is exceptional. But that same compelling message, I think, makes us more on a day-to-day basis interactive with the general populace and the consumer as well.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes good sense. So one of the things that I think social entrepreneurs, as well as entrepreneurs that don't have a social mission, need to think about is, when is growth too quick? What does it do to your business? How does it strain your supply lines? Does it dilute the quality of both the mission and your business? And so I note that you thought you'd do 1,000 cases, but you've sold 30,000 cases, and now you're in about 4 states. Was that pretty scary? Was that a scary decision for you to jump off into other states fairly quickly in your life? And how did you come by it?
It is. Those kinds of decisions are the kinds of things. I don't want to use the word agonize over every night, because again, the perspective of bringing somebody aboard the boat on a rainy night when there's not much fuel left in that airplane's tank is an agonizing thing. So I recognize that really at the end of the day we're selling beer. So, but it's just business. But it is the kind of thing that does keep me awake. And there is no easy answer to it, I think. On the one hand, you're right. What we had anticipated, what we forecast, was 1,000 cases in our first year. At launch, on the week of launch, we were 10,000 cases into this.
Oh my gosh!
And we're now, even with February and January, with those were states that were terrible in terms of weather in the Midwest, so beer sales fell off the table. But we're now, again, we're 100 times beyond where we thought we would be. As long as I can remain pure to the mission, and again, my eyes on the horizon, and can work with the people that I work with, and we're all looking at one another and saying, yep, thumbs up, or we all feel confident that we're heading in the right direction, because everybody in the company is a stakeholder. And then beyond that, there are decisions that, again, while not agonizing, are certainly troubling. I need investors. And my first thought, reaction has been to have only veterans as potential investors. Well, when you consider that only 2% of the population is serving or has served, I eliminate 98% of the people who could conceivably give me a cash infusion, invest in cash infusion, not give me, but give an infusion of finances to help me broaden the mission, to help me hire more veterans, to help me get into more states. And so, I mean, I weigh those things, and I think what makes most sense, and I have to weigh those kinds of things. Again, who do I use in the supply chain? Do I pay more but use only a veteran-owned small business? Do I accept investment from non-veterans? You know, that sort of thing is the kind of decision that I have to make on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I can think of no better way to end the conversation today but to go back to this balance between mission and vision and business goals, because it's not something you just do at the beginning. It's something that you continually, as you say, reevaluate, try to make sure that you're on course all the time, and take whatever types of changes that you make very seriously in terms of the growth of the company and the adherence to your mission. So it's wonderful having you here. Again, thanks for your service to our country and to those veterans that you're employing in your business. And so I think, Mike, we are done with this hangout, aren't we?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
We are right here at 2 o'clock. I'd like to thank you, Gary, for your insights. And I'd also like to thank Paul. To learn more about the Veteran Beer Company, you can go to veteranbeercompany.com, and I encourage it. I know that we'll be following it. Me, along with Gary, will be looking for when you're coming into the New York market, and we'll have to pick up a case.
Absolutely.
I would also remind everyone out there that's watching live or that will be watching on our YouTube recorded stream that next Tuesday, session 2, will be internal operations. That will be at 1 p.m. On June 17th, session 3 will be financing your enterprise. That also will be at 1 p.m. And finally, we'll conclude the series on June 24th with session 4, external operations, and that too will be at 1 p.m. We look forward to this series here at the Institute for Veterans and Military Families on the campus of Syracuse University. On behalf of all of us here, as well as all of us at VetNet, I thank you for coming on and presenting today and offering, your insights. One of the things that we look to do with the platform is really provide those tools and those ideas to those men and women who either are pursuing entrepreneurship right now or are considering it as a post-service career opportunity. And I think that's what we did here today. So one more thank you to Gary, Paul, and Mirza. Thanks for joining us as well. And we look forward to seeing everyone next Tuesday at 1 p.m. I will say, if you have follow-up questions from today's presentation, please feel free to bring them to next Tuesday's presentation or put them out on the event page, and we will make sure that they are all addressed. That being said, we'll sign off, and everyone have a great day.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks.